Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really fascinating set of sources about South Florida, specifically the Miami area stretching from the late 60s through the 90s.
That's right. Our goal here is to pull out the key insights about, well, the place itself, this unique American geography, but also how Miami's culture shifted and how one group's personal lives played out against some major historical moments.
And it feels like everything orbits around one central image, doesn't it? Stiltsville. It's more than just a place on a map.
Oh, absolutely. It's this cluster of houses on stilts way out in Biscayne Bay. You can see it from downtown Miami, but it feels totally separate. One character even says they look like little dinghies just propped up over the water.
Okay, so let's start right there with that feeling of isolation. Our main narrator, Frances, she describes seeing it for the first time. There are, what, 14 houses back then?
Yeah, 14 houses standing on these big cement pillars right along a channel in the bay.
And how does the source material describe arriving there? What's that first impression like?
It's all about the stillness. They pull up in this small boat, an 11-foot Boston whaler, basically a dinghy, and the driver, Mararis, she shifts it into neutral and everything just stops. Quiet, immense, maybe a little unsettling even.
And in that quiet, you find these really specific, almost strange details.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about an unusual resident near one of the houses.
Yes, under the Duval house dock, there's this story about an electric eel living in a toilet bowl that had somehow ended up submerged under there.
An electric eel.
Well,
Seriously.
seriously. Described as the meanest looking creature, looking like a very old man, and apparently it could deliver a shock of up to 600 volts.
Wow. 600 volts. That definitely paints a picture of, well, Florida. Beautiful, but kind of wild and dangerous, too.
Exactly. It captures that untamed edge of life out there.
Does the source material suggest they were, always aware that this whole setup was fragile? Or does it sort of fast forward to when things change?
Well, there's definitely a constant background hum of hurricane anxiety, which we'll get to. But the source does make the end feel quite sudden. It jumps to 1992, right after Hurricane Andrew. They take the boat out.
To see the damage.
Right. And the change is just stark, immediate.
What did Andrew actually do to Stiltsville? Physically?
It was devastating. Of those original 14 houses, only 3 were still standing. The source says the others were just neatly gone.
Neatly. That's an odd word for hurricane damage.
Isn't it? But it suggests they were just lifted and carried away. Where Dennis's family's house stood, there were only 4 pilings left sticking out of the water. It's this abrupt loss of a physical place that held so many memories.
So Stiltsville is this kind of remote bubble. When Frances, the narrator who's new to all this, looks back towards the mainland, how does she start to understand Miami itself? How does she map it in her head?
She sees it from the water, from the bay, and it's all about the contrasts. Way off to the southwest, the wild Everglades, then closer in, signs of development, those twin nuclear reactors down at Turkey Point.
Right, symbols of power and industry.
Exactly. And then the wealthier areas like Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, and finally downtown Miami, you see the Freedom Tower sticking up above everything. It's this visual mix of untamed nature, money, and the built city.
And the sources mention other specific spots too, right? It wasn't all just Stiltsville and the Bay. Vizcaya, Dinner Key, Fish Eating Creek.
Yeah, Fish Eating Creek is interesting because it's much more remote. It used to be this natural waterway up towards Lake Okeechobee. Now it's known for wildlife, serious wildlife like gators, swamp pigs.
That's big.
Apparently. And these migratory birds, swallowtail kites. Putting that wildness next to something like Vizcaya, that fancy Italian-style villa, really highlights the extremes of the South Florida landscape they were living in.
Okay, let's shift from the place to the people. We've got this core group. Frances, the narrator, Mars, our ambitious friend, and Dennis. Frances comes down from Georgia, leaving a pretty dull bang job behind. What pulled her to Miami?
She basically says she got caught up in the idea of a thrilling life. Maybe she didn't feel she had much control then, but she does give herself credit for recognizing, quote, something special when she saw it. She sensed a different kind of future was possible there.
And Marcy seems like the go-getter of the group. Law school bound, initially with Dennis.
Oh yeah, Marcy has drive. Starts off in this casual thing with Dennis, described as a lark, but she's clearly heading towards a big law career. And what's really interesting is how, years later, she becomes this incredibly important support for Dennis's family. Almost wife-like, the source says. Their connection ran really deep beyond just being friends or young lovers.
But Dennis himself, he seems less sure about his path. Law is just a means to an end for him.
Exactly. That lack of passion is a key part of his story, and it contrasts sharply with this idea from their friend Paul.
Ah, yes, Paul's theory about life. What was it?
Paul's philosophy was simple, maybe even a bit harsh. For a relationship to work, the man has to love his job. Paul loved his own work plants, people who care for plants, and he saw that professional fulfillment as essential. So Dennis's indifference to law, well, it kind of hangs over things, according to Paul's view.
That sets up an interesting tension. And speaking of going against the grain, there's Dennis's sister, Bet. She seems to reject pretty much every expectation.
Bet is definitely the nonconformist. Didn't care much about school, lived in Germany, speaks German. And then the big one, she postpones her wedding for 5 years and then bolts before it happens.
And her career choice reflects that too.
Totally. She gets into scuba diving, becomes a professional salver, recovering things from shipwrecks carefully without damaging them. Later opens her own dive shop. Her whole life is about adventure and following her own interests, not the expected path like law or business that the others were sort of aiming for. She's a vital counterpoint.
It's fascinating how these personal stories then get caught up in bigger events. The sources mention the political climate, specifically the Arthur McDuffie incident.
Right. That was a huge moment of racial tension and unrest in Miami after McDuffie died following a police encounter. Dennis reflects on it, predicting correctly and bitterly that the officers involved probably wouldn't face real consequences.
And that leads him to comment on Miami changing.
Yes, that's when he says Miami is shifting from a melting pot to a potpourri, suggesting things aren't blending together anymore. They're just existing side by side, maybe uneasily.
It's a powerful image. How does Dennis use moments like that, these times of social upheaval, when it comes to his daughter, Margo?
The narrator suggests he saw them as teaching moments, not to hide her from the difficult stuff, but to teach her how to think critically about it, how to analyze injustice and social change, not just react emotionally.
And sometimes the events they dealt with were less political, more artistic, like Christo's Surrounded Islands project in '82.
Oh, that must have been incredible to see. Christo wrapped 11 islands in Biscayne Bay with enormous sheets of pink woven fabric.
2,200 feet of fabric.
Yeah, the description is amazing. They look like giant hibiscus blossoms floating in a vast green pool. It was this massive, unavoidable piece of art right in their backyard.
But Dennis, characteristically, was a bit skeptical.
He definitely was. Joked about it, slap plastic around some land and call it art. But interestingly, he still filmed it.
Right.
And while filming, he did this mock radio voice, pretending the pink fabric was some kind of mutant flora caused by spills from the Turkey Point nuclear plant nearby.
That's so Miami somehow. High art, cynicism, and environmental anxiety all rolled into one reaction.
Perfectly put. And that anxiety, especially about the environment, was always there with the hurricanes, wasn't it? They remembered past storms like Donna and Betsy, dealt with David in '79. The fear for Stiltsville was constant.
Like a low hum of worry in the background?
Exactly. And that sense of fragility seems to inform their parenting, too, especially with Margo. There's that decision about letting her skip 5th grade.
That sounds maybe a bit unusual. Why was skipping a grade such a big deal?
Well, the reasoning was quite specific. Margo was developing physically quite early and was very self-conscious about it. They weren't worried about academics. They were worried about her confidence. The idea was to put her in a classroom with slightly older girls tossing their hair and applying lip gloss, as the source puts it.
To normalize it for her.
Yeah, hoping that being around older girls would make her feel less conspicuous, less different, even if it was maybe an academic risk. It shows how much they were thinking about her emotional well-being.
Those worries become much more serious later on when Margo's at college in Gainesville in 1990, the student murders.
Yes, a truly terrifying time, and it hit incredibly close. Margo was living in an apartment complex, Williamsburg Village, right next door to the apartment where 2 of the victims were found, apartment 113. The fear was immense. People were buying up mace, locking doors. 5 students killed in just 72 hours. Her parents begged her to come home.
But she refused.
She refused. She was determined to, in her words, stay through it all intact. She wouldn't let the fear derail her life or her studies.
That's incredible strength. Maybe a reflection of that critical thinking her dad tried to teach her.
Quite possibly. Facing the fear head-on, refusing to be paralyzed by it.
And then the family faces its own major loss with Hurricane Andrew in '92. We talked about the physical destruction of Stiltsville.
Seeing it gone, or mostly gone, really brings home the emotional impact. Dennis looks at those 4 remaining pilings where their house was, and he points out they were sunk 15 feet into solid bedrock.
All that effort.
Yawn.
Right. And his reaction is just deep sadness. He says something like, even if they rebuilt, it would only be just for a few more years. That sense of impermanence really hits him. The effort maybe doesn't seem worth it anymore. And as time goes on, Dennis gets sick with ALS. The family structure shifts again, but the core relationships hold. There's that lovely description of the family as explorers traveling in groups, but without maps, always adapting.
That really sums it up, because who steps up massively during Dennis's illness? Marseille and Bettit.
The ambitious lawyer and the free-spirited Salver.
Exactly. Any past rivalry or different life paths just fall away. They become this essential support system, running errands, helping with therapy, just being there. It shows that the real foundation wasn't the house on stilts. It was the shared history, the deep bonds they'd formed through all those years of Miami life, adventures, and challenges.
It's such a rich tapestry of experience. When you pull it all together, the eel, the career dreams, the storms, Crusoe, the caregiving, what's the big takeaway here? What does this deep dive really show us?
I think it shows that history isn't just in the big documented events. It's in the tiny, specific, often unrecorded details of everyday life. It's in remembering that weird eel, or laughing about, I don't know, rumors of sharks on cocaine in the bay, or just sharing a key lime pie out on the dock. Those intimate moments were what truly capture the spirit of a time and place.
Yeah, and the narrator mentions searching through old photos later, looking for just one picture of their Stiltsville house from a distance, wholly intact.
Yeah.
And they can't find one.
Right. The physical thing is gone, maybe never even perfectly captured. But the memories, even the fragmented or difficult ones, they stick around.
Which leads to a really powerful final thought from the source material. It points out that if we don't record things while they exist, well, what goes unrecorded can fill an ocean.
Exactly. So the question it leaves you with is, what about your own life right now? What details, the routines, the jokes, the places, the people you see every day and just assume will always be there, what significant parts of your world are you maybe failing to notice or record simply because they feel too ordinary to ever disappear?